English translation 926. Contact Thursday, the 12th of February 2026, 1:32 hours.
Though it is early in the new day, I have certainly realized that you are not asleep, which is why I have summoned you. Greetings, dear friend.
Yes, I also greet you, and I woke up dreamless from my sleep. Why I do not know, but because you called me, that's why I came over to the office. In itself, however, this is nothing unusual, because I am always up early. First I walk around the office on my pedal for a while, to get myself moving. Then I do my work on the computer, which I never finish anyway, just what I have to write for Luz2, which I have been doing all my life, because Arlene has set it up so that, unfortunately, it cannot be fiddled with, as it was when I was still writing on a typewriter. But why are you sitting at my computer?
I know that because of Luz2, because...
That was so yes, because I always had a small traveling machine at my disposal, which Askit always brought me, and so I could do my duty. That was already the case here in Switzerland, and then also when I was traveling all over the world for so many years. Askit even took a photo once when I was riding with the machine, but it was here in Switzerland. Somewhere this photo is probably still in my photo box.
That it was so, that is known to me, because Simyose told me so. But now something, dear friend, that you do not know why I am sitting at your computer and working. It is that none of us has told you anything about it, because it was supposed to be a surprise, namely that some nights I have copied some things on your computer, that I recorded in Svafa's annals, and that I have photographed and copied with Ta's permission. I thought that it might be interesting for the core group members, and also for passive group members and persons outside your association to know what Svaf talked to you back then, when you were less than 10 years old. That's why I also got in touch with Ta and discussed my idea with him, to which he replied that he thought it would be good if I copied Svafa's words and handed them over to you.
Interesting. I really did not know anything about that, and Quetzal also did not tell me. Really, the surprise is successful. What is it?
I asked Quetzal, Florino, and Ingenin not to tell you about that, because I wanted to surprise you with it.
Which you also succeeded in doing.
I am glad of this. But I want to give you what I have worked on straight away, because you can only copy it out. Let me hear. This is it.
Teaching and Predictions of Spoth, dated from 16th August 1946.
As you were able to perceive with your own senses, only 80 years in the future, the development of Earth humans as a whole is taking a very malignant shape with regard to their character defects, as we were able to ascertain. The whole thing is now taking place as a result of the failure to control the emergence of an artificial intelligence, which will emerge in only 75 years of the future, and then soon begin to develop independently, which will then also later take full control over the Earth humans, who will lose all control over it. The peoples of Earth humans will subordinate and submit to it indifferently and non-thinkingly, and they will do so in a wise and rapid manner. This technology will quickly become more and more extensive in its power, and will continue to develop and expand in all states on Earth, also in Switzerland. This will lead to confusing state leadership, whereby the state leaders will first of all become so negatively addicted to self-importance that they will imperceptibly begin to exercise unrestricted might over the peoples, and this will henceforth be unrestrained, because the Earth humans, through their indifference, will irresponsibly and faithfully integrate themselves into the new leadership technique as a result of their becoming enslaved to the emerging artificial intelligence. As a result, Earth humans will then be comprehensively dominated by it, in addition to their faith in its confused and dominating fantasies about an all-powerful deity or gods. Because of this, as has been the case since time immemorial, many believers will continue to vegetate in various fantasy delusions of many different religions, foreign to any truth, whereby entire peoples will also be dominated in the future. And that will be the time when the leaders will also wake up far too late and recognize reality. And all the different beliefs of the various religions, as well as all other faiths, have always led to differences of opinion and consequently also to vicious quarrels, hatred, violence, and often wars, which will continue to happen. In the coming period, this will be joined by the artificial intelligence that will be technically created by Earth humans, which will also bring forth new waves of crime and criminality, including many outrageous forgeries of very expensive pictures and art paintings by old masters. But there will also be forgery manipulations of film materials, as well as of photographic materials and many other things, all of which will find their endeavors in criminal ways of gaining wealth, but also in fornication, receiving stolen goods and hatred, revenge and retaliation, as well as in threats, arrogance, joking and denigration, ousehearting of a reprehensible kind, as well as in many other reasons. The artificial intelligence that will emerge in a few decades will very quickly influence the daily routine of Earth humans and also make them dependent on it. Computer technology will also be included in this and will very quickly be perfected and become indispensable, which will soon be followed by the development of androids and their creation. However, the reality of their coming into existence will not bring anything pleasant for Earth humans in the future, but rather something very contrary, as I have already explained to you on various occasions, and you have also seen together with me in the future. But you should not include this in your teaching work, but explicitly remain silent about it. Elementarily, the religious beliefs and forms of faith will be influenced in a changing way towards completely new directions and values, in such a way that the traditional, maliciously degenerated thoughts of revenge and retaliation, and the hatred with regard to multiple justifications, will reignite in the majority of Earth humans, and will not end, as they will also not learn in this respect, that their lives, as well as all life of any kind and species at all, regardless of whether they are absolutely conscious, instinctive or otherwise in terms of action and behavior, should be protected. When you teach the Earth humans in the future, it will be your duty to constantly pay attention to this, and also to point it out and endeavor to do so with parables, etc., that thoughts of revenge and retaliation absolutely belong in the realm of self-justice, and that all of this is to be judged criminal in every form, just as all of this will also very often lead to uncontrollable acts of violence, and ultimately to murder. From now on you will experience for yourself what revenge is, for it will be exercised on you for the rest of your life, whereby the vicious persecution will come especially from Mrs. Horrot as a result of her religious fanaticism, because she believes you to be possessed by the devil. That is why she was able to win over her secret lover, as well as the police and some like-minded cult members, as well as those from the authorities, to her side on her fanatical lies. Everything will develop from her fanatical delusion of faith and her revenge behavior, in such a way that you will have no chance of defending yourself against all her attacks and lies, so you will always be blamed without exception and accused of some offense which, in reality, other perpetrators have committed. However, never try to defend yourself, because everything is already arranged in such a way that you would suffer even greater damage. So keep a low profile and stay quiet, because you will never be able to stand up to the injustice against you and do anything about it for the rest of your life. Nevertheless, do your duty and fulfill your promise unwaveringly to proclaim the teachings of Nocademion, also when you are attacked and slandered, as you will learn through the machinations of faith and the fanatical religious lies of Meier. And this will be passed on to all those influenced by her in this way, right up to the top of government circles and to many of their descendants, which will continue to be the case for the rest of your life. You really have to be aware of this for the rest of your life. In injustice, you will therefore suffer unjust punishments for years as a result of her lies based on religious fanaticism and faith, against which you cannot defend yourself, which you should also not do, because this is so unfairly caused by Meier, who has connections up to high government circles, that all those involved are maliciously misled, and they would therefore cause even more evil machinations against you through your resistance. Bear this in mind, and never think you are safe, for wherever you are, danger and adversity will threaten you. The damage done by Meier in her fanaticism of faith will not only haunt you in your still young years, and also as a young man, but wherever you will always be. But you have to protect yourself through your manifold abilities to utilize your energy, which you should always bear in mind and never forget. All the character defects that the Earth human acquires in a self-educating way from birth onwards, namely in the wise way he sees, hears, feels and senses, come to the fore in the course of his life, for they penetrate to the outside at every suitable or unsuitable moment and break out negatively. Bad character values are self-educated bad values that every human being acquires absolutely on their own through their own personal self-education and can never be instilled in them by a third person. You need to understand that every single person educates themselves and shapes their character from the earliest age until old age, depending on how they evaluate all the positive or negative things themselves and how they appropriate their character. Every human being uses what they experience, see, hear, feel, think or sense, and so on to educate themselves. This is the only way in which Earth humans determine the wise or unfavorable way in which their character is formed, and they are able to acquire or instill positive or negative values in themselves, which means that it is never possible for third parties to influence their education. Consequently, in any case, he is also absolutely and solely responsible for appropriating and developing any positive or negative impulses himself, and for subjecting himself to them in a self-educational manner, and giving free rein to the unvalues of character if he allows them to break through. It will therefore be your duty to teach the teachings of Nocademion to Earth humans, so that they may learn from them, and thereby avoid and refrain from everything that is wrong and unworthy, as well as everything that is unworthy of human beings, hostile to life, untruthful and vicious, everything and every injustice and evil, in order to become and be true human beings. You are to begin your teaching from now on, and from then on by increasingly using the writing skills you have learned through me at a young age, and by writing essays which you send to the editors of newspapers all over the world for publication. In doing so, you should also address Earth humans and draw their attention to the fact that around 2.5 billion Earth humans currently populate this world, which is already too much for the existence of planet Earth and its entire nature, and all life of all genera and species. And as you have seen with me today, in 80 years' time in the future, it will then have a very vast and very dangerous Earth human population of almost 10 billion, which you will then refer to as overpopulation. Even the 3 world wars to date have not reduced the Earth human population, and, despite further wars to come, it will continue to grow in this century, causing very serious problems that will ultimately lead to unmanageable ausharting, which will also result in many human lives being lost and a state of anarchy. I also have the following to explain to you again regarding the impending climate crash, about which you have already been taught by me several times and have learnt a great deal. As I have already explained to you, it will no longer be possible to stop it through Earth humans' efforts and measures, so nothing can be reversed in this respect. All the natural climatic rules have been so severely damaged and forced to change for the worse by the unnatural actions of Earth humans, mainly through the very negative and lasting effects of the 3 world wars, that the Earth's atmosphere has been poisoned in an extremely detrimental way for a very long time, in a way that cannot yet be explored by Earth human science for a very long time, even over 150 years. In addition, the ever more irresponsible extraction of the Earth's treasures, which will become even more malignant and blatant in the future, and the detrimental effects on the atmosphere caused by their utilization have also irrevocably damaged the planet and its magnetic fields, thereby also having such a detrimental and severely negative impact on nature and the entire life of wildlife and the entire plant world, that detrimental and irreparable negative influences on the climate have arisen, which, however, will continue irresponsibly in the coming times, and will force the climate to be completely overturned. However, the beginning of this began with the First World War almost 200 years ago, which then found its devastating continuation with the Second World War, and ended with the Third World War as a result of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, although various other wars around the world between these wars also caused a great deal of harm, not only in terms of Earth humans and all their resulting detrimental progress, but especially in terms of the destruction and devastation of the planet, its atmosphere, climate, nature, and wildlife. In this century alone, 2 world wars were fought, the third of which, the Hitler-Nazi War in Germany, was incomparable to any other war, surpassing any horror I could imagine, but which was inexcusably followed by the criminal actions of America, which ended the war with the malicious and irresponsible use of atomic bombs, but which since then has likewise helped to bring the climate crush to a head faster than it would otherwise have come. The crime that is to be judged in the same way as the inhuman war machinations and organized mass murders of the Nazi army. America and the Soviet Union are responsible for the coming and unstoppable and disastrous climate crash, because they will also be the main states that carry out many nuclear tests in the future, and thus do everything they can to bring disaster sooner. The climate collapse will bring immeasurable and irreparable damage and suffering, to which Earth humans will be helplessly exposed, especially because it will continue to progress independently, together with the equally steadily increasing and globally spreading irrationality and depravity of the Earth's population. As you yourself have seen and experienced with me in the future, the latter will be hopelessly trapped by an artificial intelligence that is already in the very early stages of development, for Earth humans will make themselves dependent on it to the point of self-abandonment, and, as a result of indifference, become its slaves and thereby lose their freedom. The majority of Earth humans who will indulge in artificial intelligence will be those who will drive the whole of the irresponsible forward in such a confused way that much of what is natural and life-sustaining will be driven close to the edge of non-existence with irresponsible and destructive, as well as completely thoughtless, crazy, destructive machinations. In the foreseeable future, it will become worldwide that crazy religious, sectarian, political, and other sect-related, and otherwise also inhuman criminal things will happen, that in this respect many different outsettings will arise. Politics and religions will soon give rise to bloody terrorism, which will take very fanatical forms, be radical and merciless, and claim many lives worldwide. America and Europe will be particularly affected as a result of hateful behavior. And all in all, everything will continue for a very long time, well into the next millennium, as a result of religious hatred against the Christian world, Judaism and Islam, and senseless hatred and revenge will arise worldwide. And this is what will happen, as you have seen and experienced with me in the future. And the whole thing will, as you already know, arise fundamentally and on a large scale in the Arab world through a new sectarian system and spread worldwide with murder and destruction, but especially in America and Europe, bringing great disaster and destruction and also many deaths. All of the coming calamities in the near and distant future will also become established in many private areas and among individuals and spread worldwide, for not only will profound dissatisfaction and mass population arise among countless Earth humans throughout the Earth, but also outshotting violence. There will be a steady increase in murders of various kinds, which will result in hatred and jealousy in family circles and partnerships, just as more and more murders will also be committed in the future as a result of criminal behavior to enrich oneself in a complete lack of conscience. This, as well as greed for wealth and criminally organized whoring out to the state leadership and also in royal palaces, in many corporate managements, and in the circles of many rich people, etc., will cause a furor. In addition to the many wars still to come in this century, there will also be a worldwide increase in murder and violence among the population, as well as an uncontrollable rise in crime, ausarten, and all kinds of crime, and the spread of depravity and obtuseness. And an uncontrollability of thoughts, feelings and emotions will spread in the world through degenerate and aggressive swinging waves, whereby destructive, violent and aggressive behavior and actions will emerge in many Earth humans. All of this will lead to the destruction of human achievements and annihilation by many human beings, for which the unstoppable and immense increase in Earth humans will be fundamentally and collectively responsible. This will also be the fault of politics, whose inability to introduce birth control will not be able to stop the immense increase in Earth humans. In the coming years, it will still be my task to prepare you for your work as a proclaimer and mission, for you are to be armed against all the many adversities that will befall you, even to the point that you will be maliciously persecuted and punished for injustice as a result of your non-belief through lies and deception, just as you will also be insulted, denied, persecuted, and unsafe for life for the sake of your proclamation, which is why you will often come close to death. And because it will be necessary, as I have already explained to you several times, I will have to explain many more predictive facts to you, in addition to many events of the past, which are interpreted absolutely wrongly by earthly historians and paleontologists, but about which you have to keep silent and consequently not create confusion. In other respects, too, you will first have to name many things concerning the teaching of Nocademion, not according to the correct terms and words, but only according to the usual language usage of Earth humans, thus with existing and common misnomers, which you will have to cite in order to only then explain everything correctly when, through learning the teaching, the understanding of the correctness of the terms and words will have gradually come. And how I, together with myself, will let you experience much of the future in the coming years through direct vision, which you, however, are explicitly not allowed to let Earth humans know, will show you what will result from all that Earth humans will achieve in a very little positive, and mostly in an all-prevailing negative, namely discord, wars and insecurities of life, as well as also the continuing danger regarding the existence of the planet, nature, and all of life in general. Therefore, you have to be a word-active warner, in which you should never tire, and work diligently until the end of your days. This despite all the arbitrariness that threatens you throughout your life, which, as has always been the case, is constantly threatening you through the faith of misguided religious believers as well as know-it-alls, envious people, authorities and enemies, as well as through other people who are not well disposed towards you.
I did not know that. I mean that the conversations between Svath and me were recorded by him.
It was all recorded by him, what he spoke to you and told you, and also everything that did not concern learning. And all this is so much that his annals are extremely voluminous that day.
That is, yes. I did not know that, because he did that without my knowledge, without me ever realizing. I think that was probably good and correct, and I probably also would not have objected if I had been informed by him about it.
It really is every word of his, and also of yours recorded and captured, namely in audible language. Consequently, it can be converted into a written language, and this can then be photographed and written down in your computer by transcribing or dictating.
I had no knowledge of this before, and for you to explain it to me now is all news to me. However, it is probably not necessary for me to be thinking about it, which is why, Brahmanda, I would like to show you an email and an article, which prove that many human beings around the world are really learning a great deal through their personal work on the teaching of the truth, teaching of the creation energy, teaching of the life, and that they are also actually applying and realizing what they have learned on themselves. It is only a letter of thanks from many that I receive from people from all over the world around the earth, who write me kind, good words for having found the correct path in life through the teaching, which I'm allowed to teach in dignity and honor for the human beings, who learn it freely and without faith and compulsion, and who learn from themselves of their own free will, equally free mind and clear and valuable reason, to become a true human being of self-respect, of happiness, of sobriety and objectivity, as well as the ability to orientate themselves, as for example Blaram writes. They are also fully aware that it is not I who brings about the miracle of awakening and becoming human in them, but they themselves through their own efforts to think and learn what the teaching teaches them. And all these human beings are grateful to me simply because I pass on the teaching, which is fundamentally not my teaching, but that of Nocademion, who lived around 9 billion years ago, in the Ankar universe of our sevenfold creation, and taught the teaching in the manner it was inspired to him, how I do not know, from the creation level Arahat Atharsada, during his entire lifetime. And how since then, countless individuals learnt the teaching of Nocademion and taught it to countless peoples during their lifetimes as heralds through the billions of times, and so it has been preserved. It was now brought into our Dern universe and to Earth by the Pleiadians Thoth, whereby, as he explained to me, he had not chosen me but my parents, according to a certain principle, and I was VAX, then conceived and also born, and I was practically under his protection and his teachings for his entire lifetime. So I was forcefully taught and instructed by him before he went his last way of life at the beginning of the 1950s due to his very old age. Since then, I have endeavored to pass on his teaching, which is based on Nocademian, to the human beings of Earth, which can be taken up and learned by every human being according to their own interest and free will, and thus without compulsion. They can also do this without belief, and without being forced to do so, and turn to it in order to deal with it in a self-learning way, and thereby become free within themselves, and be able to develop into a true and contented human being with a strong character. And of all these human beings who make an effective effort to learn, it is recognized and understood that I am no more than a simple human being, and the herald of the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life, of Nocademian, but no more. Therefore I am not adored, and simply recognized as a human being, and thus simply a herald who proclaims the teaching, and no more. And for this, human beings are grateful and accord me the honor and thanks that I do. And that is really nothing more, and therefore also no adulation and elevation to something that I am not. I am grateful for this, also for the fact that Hakim has made this completely clear in an article that he has written as a very valuable clarification, which I will not conceal from showing you. But first I want to show you an email I received from Blairam, after which I will show you Hakim's article, which I will also publish in a site's icon.
Thank you, I am really interested in that, but I am surprised that you did not mention what Sfath said, which was his principle, but he found your parents, whose son you became.
I am sure you can understand that, because I just forgot exactly what he said. It is over 80 years since he said it. To reproduce something verbatim after that time, what can I say? A bit difficult. I suppose I could still do that, but I would rather not.
But that is in his annals, and if you like I can also give you his words as he said them at the time.
Really?
Yes, and I wrote them down. Here, he told you, I only found your parents after 341 years, because my principle of finding the suitable Earth humans as parents was centered on balanced, stable, objective, neutral identity and agency.
Yes, as he say them, there I remember again, and somehow, it is interesting, somehow I hear his voice in my head. Somehow it seems to me as if I actually perceive it. I know this is just an illusion, of course, but it seems so real to me. Look here. It makes my skin crawl.
I can see that. The memory is actually stirring in you.
That is so, and somehow I am still listening to the voice, but I know. It is so, and it is already passing. Then I will let you see what Blairam and Hakim wrote to me. The Chickinator.
Entrance, Figu 239ers, February 2026.
Dear Billy, Salome, I would like to send you a few personal words. Your work, your clarity, and your consistent attitude to the truth have accompanied and characterized me for many years. I particularly value your direct way of calling a spade, demanding responsabilidad en consistencia al rejected any form of faith, worship, or dependencia. It was precisely this sobriety and objectivity that gave me a lot of guidance. Your texts and explanations have always encouraged me to take a closer look, to think for myself and not to be satisfied with simple answers. I feel sincere gratitude and great respect for this. I hope that you continue to find the necessary calm, strength, and clarity to continue on your path in your own wise way, and that you have as many balanced and pleasant moments as possible. Thank you for all the knowledge, impulses, and clarifications you have passed on over the decades. Best wishes, Blerim.
It is about the teaching, not the teacher. Resist the cult of personality.
If you observe the behavior of some Figu members and other human beings towards Billy, you cannot help but notice that there is unfortunately still a tendency towards personality cults. I know this tendency from my own experience, as I had an exaggerated reverence for his personality for a long time and never dared to call or write to him on the phone, or exchange more than a few trivial words with him when visiting the center. This was rooted in my great respect for him as a human being, and also for his knowledge, wisdom, and achievements in offering creation energy teaching. To be honest, it also shows that the religious imprint of the Christian cult of God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and Mother Mary, has eaten deep into my subconscious, as it has in almost all Earth humans. From my childhood and adolescence, which unconsciously continues to trigger certain thoughts and feelings characterized by faith that can lead to an unhealthy admiration of personalities. Added to this is certainly the authoritarian upbringing in the family and at school, as well as the similarly organized world of work, where this pecking order of top and bottom is practiced and lived out almost unconsciously. Although I doubted the truthfulness of the stories from the Old and New Testaments of the Catholic Bible, aka Holy Scripture, presented in church on Sundays from a very early age, and was later able to detach myself from them to a large extent by finding and applying creation energy teaching, there were, and probably still are, other buried remnants of religiously humble thinking stored in my consciousness or in its subconscious and unconscious layers on various shelves, and influence my world of feelings, emotions, and sensations through unconscious thoughts. It seems to be the same for other seekers who come across the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life brought by Billy in modern times, which is billions of years old and originally goes back to its founder, Nocodemion. Billy is able to access Nocodemian's memory banks in order to represent the teaching to human beings in the present day and to continually expand it with new knowledge and wisdom that he has acquired himself. Nocodemian can therefore be described as the Ur-Father of creation energy teaching. It is important to note that Billy's form of creation energy is not the form of creation energy that animated Nocodemian at his time. Billy is simply a successor of Nocodemian in the sense that he teaches the teaching, but not in the sense that he is animated by the creation energy of Nocodemian. So Billy is also not a rebirth of Nocodemion, but a simple and ordinary human being, like everyone else. Rebirth in this sense does not exist. In this context, we can only speak of rebirth in the sense that the teaching is taught again and passed on again. It was only after I was able to talk to Billy personally several times, and later confess my shyness to him, that, with his help, I was able to really experience and recognize that he is a completely normal human being, to whom every other human being can speak freely and openly, feel at ease, and be happy. As in dealing with a very good, warm-hearted, and humorous friend. Nothing more, and nothing less. I was finally able to throw off the ballast of excessive reverence with which I had paralyzed myself when it came to dealing with Billy. There is no doubt that Billy has a very special and extremely difficult task in life, which he fulfills with flying colors. But he is and remains a simple and humble man who under no circumstances wants to play a prominent or outstanding role in the community of human beings. On the one hand, This is because it is a stark and irrefutable fact, and therefore the plain truth. On the other hand, Billy is deeply reluctant to be singled out, admired, idolized, or revered as something better than any other human being, because without exception, all human beings are completely equal as human beings and are simply different and individual life forms of the one creation. No one should consider themselves or any other human being more important or valuable than the rest of humanity because of their rank, knowledge, task, title, or reputation. However, if this is the way of thinking, then the seeds of a personality cult can be planted at this very moment, which can ultimately lead to exactly what must be avoided at all costs, for the sake of truth, namely the start of a new religion or cult based on Billy as a person, which would inevitably lead to delusions and confusion. As with all unrealistic teachings, religions, philosophies, etc., resulting in death and destruction. All tendencies to worship or idolize the person of the doctrinal proclaimer must be put a stop to under all circumstances, because a Billy religion would be the purest disaster for the mission of the silent revolution of truth. It is not and never about the person of the messenger and herald of the creation energy teaching, but solely about the teaching itself and about learning, recognizing, experiencing, and experiencing the reality of creation and its truth through one's own perception and one's own consideration of all aspects of the teaching, and the teaching as a whole in logic, adoration, exaltation, canonization, worship, and similar thoughts, feelings, and behavior towards Billy are reprehensible, unworthy, and harmful, and correspond to degrading and dangerous behavior by human beings who, out of pure thoughtlessness, or possibly out of cunning, greed, striving for power, and megalomania, would allow themselves to be carried away into wanting to bring a Billy cult into being, which would inevitably lead to madness and a fiasco. Unfortunately, the numerous religious and divine cults on earth have proven this to this day through countless victims of rape, torture, murder, etc., etc., which will unfortunately continue their bloody machinations for a long time to come. It is not for nothing that Billy repeatedly emphasizes that it is his duty to work out the creation energy teaching, to put it down in writing, and to teach it personally to individual human beings or groups. The former term prophet is outdated and undesirable because the predictions and warnings he makes about the future are based on the time travels and the events he has seen and already foreseen, which he undertook together with his first teacher, the wise player and Svath, and have absolutely nothing to do with a biblically glorified prophethood. The knowledge and wisdom of the evolutionary creation life energy that enlivens him together with the neutral creation energy and his tireless learning in his current life, out of his own free will and endeavor, enable Billy to be a herald of creation energy teaching. He has taken on this task of his own free will and out of a sense of duty towards creation in order to fulfill it persistently, tirelessly, and with humility. His pronounced modesty is an enormously important good, as it enables him to carry out his work selflessly, and this should be fully recognized by every human being who is interested in the teaching and wishes to study it. Modesty, in fact, demands a withdrawal of one's own personality in selflessness, and without any material profit for the fulfillment of the mission. Therefore, with all due respect and sincere appreciation for the teacher, there must never be a degenerate religious or cult-like behavior. A responsible and far-thinking school teacher, male or female, can be used as a comparison who wants to impart knowledge, skills, and abilities to his pupils, but does not want to be idolized as a personality because he is concerned with the learning and development of his pupils into self-thinking, independent human beings who are free and autonomous in every respect. Likewise, Billy is the herald and teacher of creation energy teaching and all its facts, recommendations for action, advice, etc., for all human beings. For this, he deserves reverence and respect to the same extent that is fundamentally appropriate between human beings when they live in decency, dignity, and modesty. A cult-like veneration, a canonization, an idolization, and foolish adoration, on the other hand, as many Earth humans do, at the sight or even the thought of top athletes, rulers, politicians, so-called clergy, religionists, military leaders, business bosses, scientists, and other authorities and luminaries of their field, is at all times, and in principle, unworthy, cult-promoting, and self-deprecating, and mocks the human dignity and self-respect of the human being who throws himself into the dirt of self-abasement in this way. This kind of exultant thinking and feeling inevitably leads to faith, to servile, dog-like worship, to self-denial and self-stultification, and sooner or later to the formation of cults and religions that bring disaster and death. On the other hand, the submissive behavior of those who believe in and worship them may lead to the development of psychopathic megalomania and a notorious lust for power. If these people then get into positions of power through the misbehavior of their disciples, they mislead human beings for their psychopathic purposes and can exploit them in every way, enslave them mentally and physically, exploit them financially and sexually, stir up hatred, violence, and revenge, and sooner or later lead them into devastating smear campaigns and deadly wars. The end of the story is then total destruction through brute force, the destruction of countless lives through deadly weapons, boundless misery, and the death of millions of innocent human beings. To repeat, creation energy teaching is not about the person of the proclaimer, but solely about learning and implementing the teaching in the daily life of each individual human being, but primarily about the mental, emotional, and characterological self-transformation into a true human being who lives in peace and harmony with himself, his fellow human beings, and the whole of nature. It is about human beings creating peace, freedom, happiness, joy, and love within themselves by learning and creating true knowledge, true wisdom, and profound love, and consciously endeavoring day after day to maintain, consolidate, and constantly evolve these high values within themselves. Since everything in creation is inextricably linked, names and personalities ultimately play no role. Only the individual human being's own evolutionary development, which is the best way to contribute to the overall evolution of the greater whole. Conclusion: gratitude and respect towards Billy as the guardian of the treasure. That is the meaning of his first name, Eduard, are good and appropriate, but in no case a humble, sanctimonious, unreal glorification of his personality, looking up to him as a supposed superhuman, which would carry the poisonous germ of a new and deadly religion. The very best tribute to the creation energy teaching and expression of gratitude to Billy is when a human being endeavors sincerely, diligently, humbly, and persistently, and strives to integrate the teaching into all areas of his consciousness and into his daily life with himself and his fellow human beings, and to implement everything to the best of his ability in such a way that he becomes a true human being. To this end, they should perceive all impulses, ideas, thoughts, intuitions, etc., from within themselves and from outside in a neutral way, without exception. Think about, analyze, question, and evaluate them independently, freely, and for themselves, and draw their own conclusions from them, which are logical and in harmony with the creational natural order. The thoughtless acceptance of any assertions, even if they come from a trustworthy and wise person, is fundamentally wrong, because the absorption and processing of information is only profitable if it is thought through and processed into a logical result.
It does not matter who says or writes something in the respective case.
The only important thing is that reality and truth are recognized as such, absorbed and further processed or evaluated positively and profitably for self-evolution, whereby both the individual and also the whole gain knowledge and wisdom and can evolve higher. Only the human being who actually considers everything for himself is truly alive, whereby he can lead his life to freedom, to joy, happiness, and love. Achim Wolf, 9th February 2026.
This is really very gratifying, and also valuable, and also in the respect that it effectively proves that the efforts are bearing good and valuable fruit, which you are passing on by spreading Nocademian's teaching. The words in this letter from Blarham express very clearly what valuable successes the teaching is bringing. And what Achim has summarized here is as necessary as it is valuable, whereby I also think that you are doing a very good job if you also include this in a sign of the times.
I also just think that Achim and Bernadette also constantly supply me with newspaper articles, from which I can produce the Sykes icon 1 to 4 times a month, which we then publish so that they can be read by German speakers around the world. However, I am only allowed to use and publish the newspaper articles with the permission of the newspaper in question, or the authorship. Otherwise, further use would be prohibited.
Interesting. I did not know that. That you need permission to do that, that is.
But that is so, because it is a matter of so-called copyright, and earthlings are fussy about that. And not so that something written, just articles, letters or book excerpts etc., can simply be quoted if this is not expressly permitted by the authors.
In terms of secret files or strictly private matters, etc., I think that is understandable, but newspaper articles are public, and I really wonder why they cannot continue to be used without authorization.
I suppose there's the competitive, envious and financial thing behind it, and therefore if you publish something for which no permission is given, then you have to expect court weather. For the site Zyken, which I produce from newspaper articles and so on, Achim is responsible for the authorizations, because he obtains them from the newspaper editors concerned.
I was unaware of all that.
Here on Earth, unfortunately, things prevail that fall outside what should be accepted as clearly liberal. But here, many things happen differently than normal, as the mass murderer Netanyahu in Israel can freely unleash his murderous organization on the Palestinians, allowing them to be killed in a genocidal manner and everything to be destroyed without facing any consequences. In my opinion, Netanyahu is exactly like Hitler, who as a mass murderer wanted to exterminate the Palestinians and the Arabs in general with his Jewish murder organization, or his murder of vassals. Now Netanyahu wants to exterminate the believers in Islam, in Palestine and Lebanon, as well as in Syria, Jordan, Persia, and Yemen. He is obviously being helped by his American dictator friend and hegemon Trump, who, like those Nazi-minded people in the German government, is also supplying weapons to Israel, as well as to the war fanatic Zelensky in Ukraine, so that the killing can continue unchecked.
Whereby the reason for this lies, as I personally recognized when probing his subconscious, in the fact that the war fanatic is willing to drag out the war through it, and understands how to hold on to his will to war through it, and deceptively create a mindset of patriotism. As I fathomed, his character is characterized by malice and self-importance, that in this and in his conduct of power he is able to muster neither responsibility nor compassion in himself, but indifferently and faultlessly commands and accepts that many of his murdering army fall to their deaths.
And with the America dictator it also looks really very bad, as you have noticed yourselves. Even back in Svath's day, we saw together what was going to happen, and what was going to happen drunter. Und das Opsi Bernadette's note, under and over, but I did not want to go into any more detail because Svath told me not to do that in future. But I can say that it will be unpleasant. And it is also unpleasant that the stupid hatred of Russia by all the Nazi-affiliated governments in Europe, not just Germany, only sees and regularly condemns what Russia's murderous army is doing in Ukraine, while deliberately concealing the fact that Ukraine's murderous organization is doing the same in Russia. It is the same in Israel, where the mass murderer Netanyahu is having the Palestinians massacred by his murderous army, and is still being praised and supplied with weapons by the like-minded dictator of America, Trump, just as all the Nazi supporters of the German government are doing the same, including the fact that they are also supplying weapons to the crazy war fanatic Zelensky, so that the lout can continue the war as long as he likes. All these criminal elements are not being put to shame, and are not being punished, but are instead being blasphemed and cursed in a partisan and dishonest manner, only about the Russians and the Palestinians, while the others are not being made fun of. Of course, they are no better, also not with their murderous organizations, but it is absolutely unfair and unjust that one side is simply being partisanly elevated to heaven, and the other side condemned to hell. Only warmongering partisan human beings who are not masters of their senses, but lowly intelligent and illusory thinkers and absolutely incapable of seeing reality and truth, and recognizing it, do such things. So they are usually believers, whether religious or secular, but the main thing is that they are recognized as absolutely incompetent idiots by their bogus thinking, as well as by their wrong decisions as rulers, even if nothing or not much can be done against them. Because otherwise these scoundrels will send out their army of murderers and imprison or liquidate those who call for freedom and justice. This is also currently happening in America, where dictator Trump is working according to this reprehensible principle, where no one dares to take action against this guy because otherwise he or she will be cashiered and perhaps even liquidated. This, while the sick-minded get excited about it and stick by the dictator.
While that is a bit crude to say, and I certainly understand what you are expressing, I can only agree with you, because all those who agree with this man are quite
sick in the head.
I did not mean to say that, but that they are apparently incapable of understanding, and also of reason. That is obvious.
You are, after all, a psychologist according to earthly terms, that is, an expert with a degree, whereby I think that this includes much more with you on Era than with us on Earth, especially with regard to the scientific research into the personal experience and thinking of human beings, their personal lives and their interests, desires as well as general and special preferences and the personal behavior in this regard, etc. As I have to consider what I have learned at SFOF, when I have to assess a human being and help him psychologically. Here on Earth this is not taken into account and not learned, as a psychologist told me.
The term psychologist does not exist here, but what is learned here as activities includes what is called psychology on Earth, and is basically nothing other than that.
The thinking of human beings, from which the term psychology was grandiloquently created, and people can study psychology, and then practice as psychiatrists, and not help the human beings who need their help, but have them stuffed full of psychotropic drugs.
Our learning regarding what you call psychology here on Earth is taught with us as research and counseling. Although automatic healing power is also associated with it, which corresponds only to a contingency, because with us what you know as mental illness and psychologists diagnose as such does not appear. For us, learning about the human being's world of thoughts is mainly and specifically related to the direct exploration of the subconscious, because this is the most important factor in recognizing what the human being's actual character traits are.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to address you on. You have already explored a lot about Trump and his character, and you have told me a lot about it. Can I ask you again what else you found in Trump's subconscious?
Of course. This man does not have abilities of good, but his character shows evil character deformations in very bad forms, and in a wise that he cannot control, as well as lacking abilities of humanity. These are obviously also lacking abilities of clear mind and reason, and consequently also the clear view of perception of reality and truths. This also makes the followers and supporters of this Trump seem his equal, who is effectively unmistakable in his evil character throughout what you once called an inhuman. His personality profile gives a deep insight into the nature of his disposition, which has a composition that includes directly explicit indications that point directly to his despotic dictatorial behavior and his morbid and power-obsessed thoughts in this regard. His character is marked by traits and behaviors that make him a person who maliciously influences other human beings through decisions and interactions. Overall, he exhibits traits that are opinionated, power-obsessed, and completely ruthless. He is effectively the mendacious, the unscrupulous, the arrogant, the stingy and loquacious, the grumbler, the envious, the outsutting and opinionated, the imperious and domineering. His character portrait is that of a personality with a very diverse and detailed lack of conscience, whose nature exhibits typical behavioral traits of a person who is completely devoid of any feelings for fellow human beings, nature or animals, etc., the effectiveness of life, except for oneself. This allows the essence of one's character to be comprehensively outlined in broad tones.
Thank you. I am actually satisfied with this knowledge, and besides, I have to go over to the flat and call Eva, because it is time for that now. So I will say take care and goodbye, and see you again soon. Take care.
Goodbye, dear friend.